Welcome to the Breaking Into Athletic Performance podcast. I'm Christian Chofi, one of your hosts, as always. I'm here with Ryan Smack. He's going to introduce himself, and then he's going to introduce a very special guest we have on today.
Hi, guys. This is Ryan Smack. Like Christian said, we have a really awesome guest today. His name is Kosta Telegadas. I'm going to let him introduce himself. Kosta, go ahead. It's all you.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me. Definitely a blessing to be on here. Just for a little background for the audience, let you know about my journey through the athletic performance field and the strength and conditioning field. I've got my bachelor's in kinesiology with a concentration in exercise science from Longwood University. Was there for 2 years as the sports performance intern with the athletics program. Then during my summers, I worked at Liberty University with their football strength and conditioning staff. Then had the blessings of continuing that and going forward with Virginia Commonwealth University directly after that in Richmond, Virginia. Virginia native through and through, wound up getting into grad school at the University of Miami, and had the pleasure of working under Dr. Biagioli there as one of the graduate students, and was fortunate enough to obtain a GA position my last year and a half there in South Florida with the U's athletic staff. And from there, worked with cheer, dance, and swim during most of my time there for Olympic sports. Directly after that, went to a inner city high school in Richmond, Virginia called Henrico High School. Loved every second working with those kids. We're going to dive into a little bit about that in the episode. And then, unfortunately, the job couldn't go full time, so went from a part-time position there to working with Exos up in Detroit, Michigan for almost 2 years. Then I am very, very, very fortunate to land on my feet during COVID, and I'm the first tactical strength and conditioning coach here at Langley Air Force Base, working with the pilots of the first fighter wing.
So that's that. We've got a guy on today who really has some different experiences than what we've had on before, so we appreciate having him. So, Kosta, let's get into it a little bit. So, of all those experiences you just laid out, what do you think is the one where you grew the most at?
Oh, man. See, that's a great question. I think I think there's two. I don't think there's necessarily just one. I think there's two specifically where I grew. The first one was at the high school level after my grad assistantship at the University of Miami, because you're dealing with inner city kids who are in gang-related neighborhoods. So, you may not have the best equipment, the best support staff. There's problems with these kids in the neighborhoods they're in, and I'm responsible for dropping them off, in gang-related neighborhoods because their dad or mom is too high to come pick them up. Like, this was a real scenario that I faced. So it really showed me the reality of the field and how you need to structure your programming to deal with that. I can't run a Cal Dietz triphasic, 12-week model with these guys because it's going to burn them out. I think one of the biggest scenarios I had was we had women's basketball there hadn't eaten in, I think, 18 hours one day. So they're doing a basic work capacity circuit they've normally crushed in the past. And all I remember was they just the eyes are sagging, their morale's low. It is just a complete shit show from what I'm seeing. And from that, I stop everyone like, hey guys, am I missing something? Like, what's going on? And then they tell me what's going on. They haven't eaten. I'm like, okay. We just took the time to dial back and just talk about, okay, what are some practical solutions we can do? Like the effectiveness of a peanut butter and jelly. I don't have a dietitian on staff. I have to make those adjustments and keep things very generalized there. Secondly, I learned that role that movement quality is just top notch. You can have a very generic program that's not scientific that can produce huge results as long as the culture is there, as opposed to a super scientific program with no culture. So in that case, being more general is more specific. And then in my role with right now here at Langley Air Force Base, I think that's a position where I've grown the most from a personality standpoint and communication standpoint. Because you're dealing with guys who, in all honesty, they're flying $200 million death machines to go over and fight for our freedom. And it's very, very unique. These guys have very interesting experiences, and they range from being, 23, fresh out of the academy as a casual lieutenant to, hey, this guy is, one of the top 10 pilots the Air Force has ever seen. And he's about to end his career here, and he's one of the best. Or even I got the chance to brief a 4-star general the other day. Like, that is a very, very big experience. So you have to learn how to juggle multiple tenures, multiple populations. You have to have your testing metrics right, make sure you don't injure them because then it can come back on you and the rest of your staff. And then you have to remember, you're going into their world. They're not coming into yours. So you have to meet them halfway with a lot of stuff. You have to remember that this is not a mandatory program for them. So I don't have, like when I was at Miami, we had men's basketball on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday in the off season, the whole week. However, here I may get a guy for 3 days a week, and that's a big victory for him.
Yeah.
The scheduling and other things. So you got to find ways to work around that. But those would be the two roles where I would say I probably have grown the most. And I've only been here at Langley for roughly 3 months, so it's definitely a blessing.
Nice. Yeah, I definitely want to get more into the ins and out of your programming and stuff later on. But so you talked about the kids who may have not have eaten that week or that day or whatever. So how did that really change your perspective in the field? Whereas you were thinking more about the kids' mental health and your own mental health and being able to stay, positive in that environment. And then you can expand on that if you want and talk about, I know we're going to get into it, the mental health of the strength coach in general. So I don't know what you thought there.
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things that I learned was, okay, minimal effective dosage versus maximal effective dosage. That's a common phrase you hear. And for the young strength coaches that may or may not be listening, minimal effective dosage is just the minimum amount of sets, reps, volume, load, whatever I need to create an adaptation in the body, whether it's short-term, long-term, whatever it is. Maximal is the most I can get out of you that day without overtraining you. So long story short, you learn that minimal effective dosage is even used to a higher extent than you would see in college. You guys are GAs and interns, and it's, incredible to see. But at the same time, these are just kids. These kids are not Division I athletes. They haven't been recruited. Some of them are going to be recruited, but a lot of them won't be. And that's something you have to realize. So sometimes one set of 50 reps, if it's just 50 push-ups, knock it out, or 2 sets of 10 lunges each side will be much better than doing a barbell split squat with, 65% of your back squat max for sets of 5 each side. Like, that's a very common example that I would use. I'd also really push the education for the kids. Let them load to form. What is comfortable for them? This may be their first intro to strength and conditioning. So if they even put a bar on their back, like, I don't know if you guys remember the first time you ever back squatted, but it kind of leaves an indent your first time. So that's a big thing, especially when you're dealing with female athletes. So how do I go from there and give them that scenario and understand where they're coming from? Because if I don't know what's going on inside their head, I can never communicate with them. So that's probably the biggest example that I learned there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. Ryan, what you got for him?
Yeah, so sticking with that high school setting, if you're going into a situation where you have to drop kids off into like unsafe neighborhoods and just step into a whole world that you might not have necessarily been expecting or exposed to, what are some things that you did to try to break down those walls between you and the kids at first, so you were able to gain their trust and start to have conversations to kind of understand where they're coming from and what they need from you as both a coach and just kind of like an adult role model, I guess?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I did starting off was telling about my time growing up in Richmond. I grew up in the West End, which is the polar opposite of that side of town. I grew up in the middle to upper middle class neighborhoods, safe suburban school, but I also hung out downtown a lot as a kid when Richmond was the Detroit of Virginia. And it's one of those things where it was dangerous back in those days, probably I'd say about 8-10 years ago, so I would tell them about my stories, my adventures from getting in trouble in high school. And I wouldn't say that in a bad way, but I'd use it as more of a, hey, I wish I had done this kind of way. Hey, let me be honest with you, because the teachers are just going to keep it very politically correct, kind of dodge the topic. But I'm your coach. I will tell you openly what happened if you want to talk about it. I have zero problem with that, as long as it keeps you out of trouble. I think secondly is educate them. Like, where is it going to go? Where is it going to lead you to? And third is, try to find ways to identify with the kids. For instance, I was the first white strength and conditioning coach the school has ever seen. This school is in a predominantly Black neighborhood. Now, there's a lot of resentment during that time period to police, how the whites have gentrified the areas in Richmond. So how do I show them, okay, I'm not one of your teachers. I'm not one of these people trying to put you down. I'm not one of these, guys who's, go cops all the time and being their cheerleader. I want to actually talk to them. So I would ask them, what's your favorite hip hop album? And then I just start talking with them about it. And it was just small little things like that shows that you really understand them. You want to talk to them. You want to forge that relationship. Ask them how their day's going. You know how many of the teachers actually ask them, hey, kids, how's your day going? Because I had a kid, his mom got shot one time. His grandma got shot 2 weeks later. Like, the kid was absolutely just a wreck. And I'm just like, okay, well, hey, come here. Just gave him a hug. Nobody had hugged him that day because it was just another day in the neighborhood for them. So it's one of those things where when you have those conversations and show that you care, it goes miles with them. Huge. So how can I take that little bit and then open up that door just a little bit more? And then if something bad happens, then they like, Coach T, can I come talk to you? Please, like I have nobody to talk to. That's the pinnacle of success in that realm for me.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think a lot of the time people are trying to find ways that they can connect with kids by being similar. But at the end of the day, kids like to hear about things that they've never heard about before too. So if you can tell them stories about things that you've done that they've never even fathomed, that's going to be a connection for them all the same. So, I mean, it's really how you look at it. I think people really get into, how am I the same as this person? How can I talk about the exact same thing that they want to talk about? And at the end of the day, it's just about having open communication to a degree, you know?
Yeah. And communication is just such a huge topic in strength and conditioning. Like if I cannot articulate something as far as let's say cueing, like that's a huge example in our field. If you read Nick Winkelman's book, it's phenomenal. But he was talking about the attention spans are dying down in kids nowadays, from the dopamine hits they get in their brain from social media to how much information is thrown at them a day they got to process. They're not going to listen for more than 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And now you're talking about kids who already don't generally like authority and like to have a little more stuff on their own stuff because they have to, provide for their families. They got to provide for their brothers. They got to go fight someone if they have to defend themselves. So anything that you tell them, they're really like, okay, well, you don't live in my world. You don't know what's going on. So I had to be very quick and concise with my communication. And on top of that, I give them little quizzes, daily quotes to memorize. Now it gets them invested because it gets them thinking. The quotes would be, from famous coaches. Who's a good one? Like Coach K. A lot of these kids love basketball. I sent quotes from Coach K to that group chat we had, and that got them thinking. So when I go back and say, okay, if you don't remember the quote of the week and I call on you, you owe the group 10 push-ups, 10 sit-ups, and 10 pull-ups before you leave. So that way we're still getting something in, and now the kids are investing. So if I can communicate an exercise in 2 cues or less, make it visual so they can see it, and do it under 5-10 seconds, well, they're going to do it right the first time. And then they see small bits of success building up. You know how many of these kids have actually lunged or squatted before?
Probably none.
None. So when they do that right and they're thrown into that split stance for the first time, like, whoa, like this is really weird, coach. I'm like, okay, brace your core. String is pulling you tall to the ceiling. Grip the floor with your feet and drop your leg. That's 4 cues right there, but that's just like a practical example, And even then, make it fun. I would ask them, who's your favorite MMA fighter? They list off, Conor McGregor or somebody, right? So I would say, okay, take a deep breath in and pretend Conor McGregor is going to punch you in the gut, literally. And then now that resonates in their head and it creates that memory loop and they're sticking there. So it's small things like that really go a long way.
Yeah, for sure. So on that, then, you talked about a lot of things that you could do with those kids specifically. What are some other skills that most people might not pick up or might be afraid to pick up? I mean, not necessarily in the high school setting, just along your ride. What are some skills you've picked up that most people don't necessarily use?
So I'm going to relate this back to the fighter pilots here. Like I said, they fly very expensive, very complex machine all day. It's not like Call of Duty or what is it? Any of the games you see nowadays, you can hop in, press like the Y button and fly that thing, right? No, it takes years to learn how to fly this thing outside the basic maneuvers, So they sit down and they go through briefs at the end of every flight, whether they worked a 20-hour day, a 24-hour mission. They'll go debrief for 2 to 4 hours, whatever. They'll get as much coffee as they need to, and then they'll go. So they're constantly learning and getting feedback. So the biggest skill, I would say, as a young professional, learn how to take feedback. Always learn. Education is lifelong. It is not just, okay, I got my master's, I finished up my grad assistantship, I finished up this internship under this legendary strength coach. No, you have to keep learning. You have to, because you never know what you're going to learn on the outside to bring back into your program with your athletes, with your, spec ops, tactical guys, whoever. It always helps. Like I learned, what's a good one? I went off and researched communication, psychology, body language. That has paid off dividends for me relating to people, because majority of what we do as human beings without realizing it is nonverbal, which means like if I meet you in person and your arms are crossed and your eyes are down, but you're telling me you're happy, well, clearly you're not happy. Now it's a very easy example to spot, but there's other small things that really play into that role as well. So learn communication, learn psychology, always educate yourself.
Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like you're analyzing us right now. It kind of scared me.
Little know, little do you know, gentlemen.
Ryan?
Yeah. So what are some things that you did to kind of step into their world, like you mentioned at the beginning, or educate yourself about the demands of what they do on a daily basis, coming from mostly like an athletics background and stepping into that military side of things?
Yeah, so the first thing I did was sit down with as many squadron commanders as I could. So it's one of those things where if I can talk to him and he supports my program, one, I'm getting guys in, because you're going to the top of the chain saying, hey, here's who I am, here's my role. I know you guys have wanted this for a long time. Let's have a conversation. They'll break down like, okay, in the jet, I need to grab the bar and turn, almost like 180 degrees to see the guy behind me who's trying to kill me potentially. Or if they're doing flight simulations, they'll practice dogfighting one-on-one, where an older pilot who's way more experienced will try to get you, and it's a very intimidating sight, especially if you see it on base. But okay, so I need thoracic mobility, and I would just break down what they knew, what they were telling me, what they were showing me, and bridge it with what I already knew. So we know that if I grab the bar and turn over in the jet and have to look behind me, well, that's thoracic mobility right there. So that might be something that they need. But then other guys may want to have their own goals. So then meet them halfway on the goals as well. Like it doesn't just come to how to be the best fighter pilot. Because once again, it goes back to that general spectrum. If you have a very general training program, it's going to be way more specific in this case because none of the guys have had any structure before. We go back and look at, some of the Soviets and their periodization. They had just 3 years of generalized training before you could ever specialize in something. And even then, I'm not seeing these guys on a hard scheduled basis, So anything that I give them, they're going to get better. And that's at the end of the day. The goal is just reduce injuries, increase performance, decrease pain. It's the very simple stuff we talk about every day. And it's nothing complex or crazy. But talk to them, get to know them, talking about like their tours, where they've lived. A lot of my guys have lived all over the world in South Korea, Japan, Italy, England, talking about their personal life, resonate with them. Majority of my guys have been divorced at one point. Like it's not a pretty world. It's a lot like strength and conditioning, because they're traveling all over the place. And then figure out, like, talk to the younger pilots because they're your bridge. Because the older pilots, they'll do whatever they want. They have the confidence, and a lot of them are smart enough to learn and execute working out on their own. So then, okay, maybe they just need me to act as a consultant for them. Maybe they just want me to help them with the program they already have. So there's multiple avenues you can take to help bridge the gap between you as a coach to the pilot right now.
Yeah, those are some good points. I didn't really – something I was going to ask was if you have like a high ranking, like a colonel or above or something, are you pretty much catering to whatever they want to do? You kind of answered it, but like do you almost get – I know you're not in the military, but do you almost get like starstruck, which is really where that term came from?
Yeah, I don't think so. A lot of the guys that I'm dealing with are very intelligent men who realize at the end of the day, they don't know everything. It's not like the movie Top Gun where Tom Cruise is like the know-it-all pilot for the Navy. No, it's nothing like that. These guys listen, they learn, they are incredibly intelligent. And here at Langley, to test even in the F-22 program, you have to test top of your class. That these guys listen, learn, and just keep rolling with the program and constantly learning throughout their whole life. Their motto, I think one of the younger pilots told it to me the other day, it was be humble, be coachable, and be approachable. So this is why like these older pilots who are like literally legends in the flying field that I can't even say here on the air, right? Like that's how up they are. These younger pilots want to learn from them. They will fly against them and learn from them. Like that's one-on-one experience. It's like if you and I went straight to, any of the major coaches in our field and had an hour with them just to take notes. Well, you best believe that hand is going to be moving the whole hour with that pen or pencil in my hand. Mm-hmm. These guys basically have the equivalent of their PhD in flying a fighter jet. And they're also the NBA All-Stars of flying fighter jets. So they're in a position to learn and grow. So it starts from the top down. But no, I don't really feel starstruck with them because these guys want to learn. They want to be there. Or they just want some basic help. Maybe they just need a spot. Nothing wrong with that, man.
Yeah. Sweet. That's very interesting. So let's switch gears a little bit for now. So how did you get that opportunity down there? Like, did you just apply for it out of nowhere? How'd that go?
So I was working at Exos, and I loved my time there. Learned a lot, but I felt very constrained in the system. I felt very, like I was going to be forced into management to get that pay bump that I was looking for potentially. So I'd had a lot of conversations with spec ops strength coaches during my time in Florida, because Florida's a huge military hub, excuse me, for a lot of bases. And I ran into Tom Palumbo when I was a grad assistant down there, who's the NSA Florida director. He's works with the Spec Ops group out of Eglin Air Force Base in the Panhandle. So he was telling me, man, I wish I'd done this 20 years ago. And if you had talked to me before I met Tom, I would have been like, no, it's athletics, college, Power 5, this, the cliche example. And suddenly Ron McKeefery's the keynote speaker. And this one moment resonates with me before I meet Tom. So it's kind of like an A plus B equals, wow, maybe I should start reflecting kind of scenario. And he goes in and he says, how many people know someone in this field who has personally been or has been divorced because of this field? And mind you, there's 350 strength coaches at this conference, like in the whole state of Florida. Not one hand was down. Not one. So right then and there, I'm like, okay, well, I've always heard the horror stories, but okay, maybe this, I don't know. You're a young coach, you get intimidated. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly I meet Tom, and he's like, oh man, the tactical side's booming right now. It's going to grow consistently over the next 5 years. I was like, what do I have to do to get over there? It sounds awesome. And we just stayed in touch ever since. I wound up, once again, getting tired of my time in Detroit, which we'll get into later. And then I wound up going in and just seeing a lot of tactical positions online. I connected with as many recruiters as I could, because the way it works is the Department of Defense puts up a job for a bid, and 15 to 20 companies can bid. These are the middle tier companies. It's not the Boeing or the Lockheed Martin or the Booz Allen Hamiltons that are going for the multi-billion-dollar contracts. These are, the second tier companies that have already been established in it. Mm-hmm. Called as many of them as I could, got all the names, and then I fit all the criteria. So the second, I got one, I think it's like the 2 people that I didn't get in with, that I didn't put a bid in with, wound up getting it. So I had one of the recruiters that I had formed a relationship with call me and say, hey, Kosta, we didn't get the bid, but here's the website for the guys that had. I already sent your resume to them. They have one opening left. Are you interested? I said, absolutely. So then I got a call less than 48 hours later, signed the letter after a 20-minute quick interview with my current contracting boss, and now I'm here. And then COVID hit, and there was a 3-month delay, but we wound up being okay.
Sweet. So then how, if for someone else who's looking to get into that field, would you say the best way is to cold call those companies that are bidding for it?
I'd say get at least 2 to 3 years of applicable experience first. This is not going to be something where they're just going to give it to like a grad assistant right off the gate, Even though a grad assistant could easily do this, the government wants to see years of experience. So that would be the best way to do it, then cold call them. So if you can get in with a company like Exos or, O2X or some big time company where you're working with professional athletes, that would be your best route starting off, or high level Division I.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's always the toughest thing, because once you finish your master's and do your GA and whatnot, there's almost nowhere to go unless you get lucky and land a paid internship, and even you're pretty much living on dirt pay. So that is
done that, man. Been there, done that.
That's tough. It's really tough out there. Ryan, have anything to go from there?
Yeah, so kind of relating this next question to everything we just talked about, from divorced coaches to nowhere to go after your masters and stuff like that. I know you're extremely passionate about the mental health side of being a strength coach, because nobody talks about it. And just talking to you off air, you have a lot of really, really cool insight and opinions about the mental health side of being a coach and what you need to be expecting and be ready for. So I would like to kind of hit on some of the challenges that you faced just as a human being, trying to move through all the different stops you had and moving around the country and not knowing what was next. If you don't mind kind of getting into a little bit of what was going on in your head, when you got done with your GA position through where you are now, and kind of how that affected you and how you grew from it.
Yeah. I'll hit some personal notes as we go through this topic. It's probably the most lengthy topic right here, but I love talking about this, man. So basically, when I got done with my GA, we had a transition of coaches at Miami, and the culture just kind of went down for me. And I know I'm saying that, I've had some great mentors in my life, but I truly do passionately believe this. And that was just really hard to go through the last probably 3 or 4 months. realizing that you're being set up for a full-time job there, just to have a transition happen, and boom, everything's gone. So now you have to adjust. Okay, you're going back home. Okay, got to move in with mom and dad. And you have a master's. So now all your friends are like, oh, well, you have a master's. Don't you have your job? So now you're feeling a ton of social pressure to get a job, move out the house, do X, Y, and Z. And like I said previously, I wound up a little lucky. I wound up getting a part-time position at that high school in Richmond. But I also was not making enough to have full-time income, obviously. I got less than a $2,000 stipend making $1,800 for the year. Like, I would like to make that clear for our viewers. Yes, that number is not 18,000, it's 1,800 for the year. So obviously I shift gears, I look for, other jobs that could maybe fit the schedule. I go be a recruiter, and now I'm in corporate America during the day. I'm at the school at night, working 80, 90 hours a week, and football season, and it is just taxing. So I'm in at the job with a recruiter at 6:30 in the morning. You don't get done at the school till like 9, maybe 9:30, and then you have to go to bed and repeat. Now that sounds like the normal day of a college strength coach, but it had grown so much on me, and you're not getting what you're worth. And you feel like, man, I did all this money. I entered under all these great people. There's a sense of entitlement that comes with it. Right. And that's, I think, where the first part where I messed up. You're not guaranteed anything at the end of the day. This is a risk. It's a calculated risk, hopefully, for you. Use it wisely. From there, it pushed me to network. So I wound up calling every coach I could. I remember I would even call them at work when I was a recruiter. Like, I would take my little headset outside the hallway so no one could hear me, and I'd be like, hey coach, like, how you doing? On the air. And it was unique, right? And I realized one thing during that time period. I learned how to network. I learned how to write an email to a coach. I learned how to introduce myself if they've never met me. I learned how to send them a very professional copy of my resume. So we'll get into that a little bit later, or maybe in part 2 of this, but it taught me how to do things on the fly. And I even asked for feedback from them. Hey, look, I know we just met, but any feedback on the call? And some of them would say, no, it went great. Some of them wouldn't really say too much. And some of them would just, they grill you. That's okay. You need to fail to learn. And sometimes that means touching, the stove, and it's hot, but you got to remember the stove's hot, so it's going to burn, but you may not know that till you actually do it. So in that scenario, that's what I learned. I also learned that I did not like working in corporate America, sitting down, as a recruiter, hearing Karen in the corner, complain about how bad her husband treats her. Like, no, I just, that's not me. That's why we got into strength conditioning. We love what we do every day. We're type A people, and we like making a difference in people's lives. And in that role, I felt like I wasn't really making a difference. And it just really solidified your purpose. Why do you want to be here in the field? So then I wound up, quitting the job after about 3.5, 4 months. Just went to my boss, like, hey, this isn't for me. I want to focus on the high school full time. And I wound up doing that with part-time pay. Obviously, hits your mental health once again. You are taxed. You're still feeling that pressure after about 6 months being out of grad school. You still don't have a full-time job, and no one really understands the strength and conditioning field. So, you start applying everywhere, start sending your resume out randomly to people with a proper cover letter. Eventually, I'd had some successful interviews with Exos, and I knew that I didn't want to move again, but I would have to. So they said, hey, look, we really liked you for this job in Philly. Unfortunately, we gave it to somebody else, but there's a position in Detroit. They want to interview you. So when I'm going through the interview process, wound up getting it. And next thing you know, I'm in Detroit, Michigan. And suddenly you are ripped away from being at home. Like I had, been in Miami for 2 years. I didn't see my friends. I didn't talk to them. It was very taxing because I'm a very social person, and that's how I recharge the person. I go out, I have a beer with some friends, and whatever it may be. So now, I'm in Detroit. It's cold. It's the middle of December. I just moved there, and you don't have anyone. You're starting over again from scratch, and you're not in school. So you need to realize that you got to be willing to go from job to job to job. And that means you could be in LA 1 year, maybe 8 months. Now you're in New York. Now, New York, you're in middle of nowhere, Georgia to, like Tulsa, Oklahoma. Like, you've been all over the country and back. So you got to be willing to move for it. On top of that too, when I was in Detroit, it's like, okay, how do you sustain a relationship while being a strength coach? This is a very, very, very taxing thing sometimes. And even though with Exos, I was only working 40 hours a week, I wound up talking to this girl for 3 months, and it was phenomenal. And then, 3 months in, she pulls away randomly, winds up leaving me for an ex-boyfriend. And now I'm stuck in Detroit by myself. Her friend group was my friend group, and she left. And now I have no friends. and now I'm back to square one again. So it's like you get just a little bit higher, then get the crap knocked out of you. Get a little bit higher, back to square zero. A little bit higher after that, back down. So immediately, like this is just a mental health disaster, perfect storm recipe, whatever you want to call it. So I eventually at that point, like I was like, okay, well, it's been 7 months of this after the fact. I need to go start making friends somehow. Like I'm trying, it's not working. And I literally just walked into a bar at, I want to say 10:30 in the morning for brunch, sat down, told my life story to the bartenders, and suddenly it just became a normal thing. I went in there every Saturday at 10:30 in the morning. Every Saturday at 10:30 in the morning, you get to know all these people and you get to hear about their stories, their adventures. And this is kind of where the interest and communication began. So sometimes some of the worst things that happen to us wind up becoming the best things that ever happened to us. There's just silver lining, but you may not see the lessons learned until years later. And because of this event, these bartenders became my friends and they introduced me to their friends. And now instead of having, a girl that left me, I have 25 friends and we're all doing stuff in downtown Detroit, whether it's going to a Pistons game all the way to, hey, we're going out tonight. And it was just really relieving and fun. So you learn how to network, you learn how to grow, and you learn how to talk to people and read body language. Like I said, that's the most important quality anybody in the world can have. So this is not to be some sad story. That's not the point. But you need to understand the peaks, the valleys, they come in waves. Because, Air Combat Command could call me tomorrow and say, hey, dude, you don't have a job anymore because the government decided to cut the contract. Okay, so what's next? But the good thing of this that I grew from it is that all those connections I made, whether it was when the girl left me and, I made 200 plus connections that year. I was offered jobs a lot of the time because of that. People are always trying to hire. You just got to be willing to look for it. And even then down the road, I the other day, I got a call saying, hey, would you be interested in coming up to DC for this job? And, I turned it down, but it was small things like that. It's like, man, I did such a good job talking to that guy over the past 5 years that he recommended me for that position. And that was to be the director of strength and conditioning for DC Fire and Rescue. So you never know where it's going to take you. And because of that, now I can have the outreach that I have. I can be that platform for younger coaches. Because of that trauma, you learn and you grow from it, man. And that's my story with it. I'm happier than I've ever been now, but I know that during strength conditioning in this field, you will hit hits of depression. You will hit places of anxiety. You'll have imposter syndrome. That was a big thing that I had, oh, am I good enough to be here? Am I smart enough to handle this programming? But then at the end of the day, you look at what everyone else is doing. You're like, well, the basics work. Mm-hmm. So dive back to a lunge. Firm believer that a lunge fixes 90% of the problems. But the mental health aspect, I think, of strength coaches is not talked about. And if I'm going to tell an athlete, hey, you need to rest, recover mentally, physically, and I'm working 80 hours a week and I'm not doing that myself, well, then I'm the biggest hypocrite in the room. Why are they going to listen to me?
For sure. Yeah, I think a lot of people are having a lot of similar experiences as you right now with the COVID thing. I mean, I lost my position, so I'm in one of those ebbs and flows right now, looking to make my way back up because it's tough. I mean, I had to move back in with my parents as well. It's very difficult as a young coach who, like you said, you have a master's degree. There's a lot of social pressure to be making tons of money because people don't understand the field. So that's just an excellent point. So then what are some skills you learned? I know you talked about the going to the bar at 10 a.m. every Saturday. That's something that probably 1% of people would be willing to do, but you make it work. I mean, people don't want to go out and do stuff like that. So what are some other skills that have worked for you to take time off, to step back and relax and just get your head right?
I think one of the biggest things I experienced in Detroit was in that middle ground before I really started hanging out with the bartenders was I just decided, hey, dude, you've worked 8 months. You haven't even done a vacation yet. You're going to lose your vacation time at the end of the year if you don't take it. So the NSCA National Strength Conditioning conference was in DC that year. So I wound up just booking a plane ticket, going to the conference last second. Loved every second of it. Used my PTO to ride me out through the weekend of that Monday. And I made time to catch up with friends because I think a lot of times coaches, even whether you're employed or unemployed, you're not taking time to check the mental health box. You're not taking time to go off and reconnect with people. How many of those events did I miss back home, whether it was my friends breaking up with their girlfriends, getting a promotion, maybe they got married. and I couldn't make it to the wedding because of work. Well, take time for that. Like it's one of those things that you just have to do, and it'll make you feel good inside, and I think that there's a lot of stress in our industry. So any chance you get a little bit of that hit of, hey, I did good today, I put something good out in the world, it makes you feel better. It can definitely help ride you through those hard times. I think secondly, learn another skill, because you might hit some downtime in the road. For me right now, I wound up learning how to, run a podcast. I run my own right now, and it's fun. I wound up from those connections that I mentioned, from cold calling or just texting people, or, hey, do you know so-and-so? I'm trying to get in touch with him. I got a chance to write for Team Builder and Simply Faster. Well, that's another small income stream, and then they liked it so much they wanted me to write another one and another one. So these are small things you can do, because remember, you could probably be the best strength coach in the world, but nobody knows who you are. There's 100 resumes that come in my inbox if I post an opening here at Langley, through my boss, and I got to forward them to him. Do I know you? That's a real question, because we want to hire people that we know, or people that are recommended to us from someone that we know. So just understanding that, I think, are just small ways you can kind of last through the hard times. I think don't be scared to think about trade. Trades are booming right now. If you want to go be a mechanic, be a mechanic. Like, that's a great field to be in. It could even give you connections down the road that you may have never thought of. I stumbled upon strength and conditioning by accident. Like, that's a real thing. So just understand that there's plenty of ways you can still stay active in the strength and conditioning field. I know a lot of people go work for play. There's a lot of great coaches who are like, I want to take a break from coaching. Let me go work from play. Gary Schofield, one of the guys that I look up to, he just took a job with play. Just small things like that to keep you active in the field. So that way, when that opportunity does come up, you're ready.
Yeah, I don't think that your hobbies and your other interests necessarily have to be unconnected from strength conditioning. They can be connected, but as long as it's something that's taking your mind off your other 80 hours that you're putting on, or hopefully less than that, then it's still a mental break. One thing you said, I forget exactly what triggered it, but you're talking about how you want to hire people that right? So when I was doing an internship, I was listening to the two full-time coaches. They're looking to hire a GA, and they were talking about a couple of people they're looking to hire. And he said, well, this guy he played football. He's going to be a big presence in the room, all this stuff. And then he was talking about another candidate, and he said, but this guy sounds like he'd be fun to drink a beer with and hang out with. So, and at the end of the day, they went with that guy. Like, the other guy may have had a better resume and all that stuff, but if you're not personable and you don't know, you have no clue how to talk to people, then, you can't fit in well in that environment. So, it's not always about having the perfect resume. It's definitely about being able to talk to people and stuff like that. So that was cool that brought that up.
Yeah, and I think kind of building off that a little bit, even during that rant that I had about the mental health ups and downs that I've had in the field from the time I was, high school to Exos in Detroit, you learn how to talk to people. When you learn how to talk to people, guess what happens? People like you more, because the world does respect extroverts at the end of the day. And we socialize with that. Human beings are social creatures. So if you learn how to socialize and have a certain presence around people, you could be the dumbest person in the room, but you could still get the job. And you can learn from there too. Now, I'm not advocating that, strength coaches aren't trained the right ways or intern under the right people, because there's a lot of crap out there. But if you learn if you learn the basics of strength conditioning, right, and then learn how to be personal with people, now not only are you getting other coaches to hire you, you'll get your athletes to buy in. Now you look great in your program. So it all comes back to each other. And I think what you guys are doing with the podcast is a great way to start learning how to talk to people. I've learned more from interviewing, people on my podcast, where I just interview young professionals from other fields and just try to learn from them and pick out major themes. I learned stuff from a female, one of my friends. She was a former athlete of mine, Jamie Barber, and she's a female senior auditor at Ernst & Young right now at 26. You think there's not something to learn from that conversation that you can't bring back in?
Yeah.
She's incredible at her job. Let's talk about it. There's so many lessons you can learn, man. And I think it's great that you guys are doing this now during your downtime, and make the most of it.
Absolutely. Ryan, you are the hardest working person I know in strength conditioning. and you seem to be mentally healthy. What tools do you got for us?
I think something that's really important that we already kind of touched on is you need to be able to form relationships with people outside of your job. So like whether it's the bartenders in your case, or in my case it was like I'm lucky enough to still be in a serious relationship where I have the support of my significant other to do this job, because a lot of times you don't. And until that, when I was in college, I was getting my undergrad. Every time I'm not in class, I'm on the floor from 6 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. I go home, I do homework for 2 hours, I go to bed. The only people I interact with are strength coaches and student athletes. You're not going to go out with the student athletes if you're responsible, right? Strength coaches have their own families. They might be 40 years old and you're like a 20-year-old kid. You're not friends with them, even if you're friendly. So like, I didn't have friends for like 2 years. I transferred to Nova and I was like all in on strength and conditioning, tried to set myself up for a GA. It worked, but like I got to the end of it and I'm like, I've gone 2 years without having any personal life, So I tried to really not pull away, but prioritize, okay, I need to start making friends with people. I need to have a social life because I just neglect that part of my life. So I think a lot of it is just you need to be able to sit back and reflect on what's actually going on day to day. Because like I said, like that's not something that I was doing. But once that dawned on me, like I needed to prioritize that, and I stepped outside of my comfort zone. I started taking a chance with, okay, I'm going to try to date this girl. I don't have time. It's going to be a long distance relationship at some point, but you need to keep making time for those things. And I'd ask for an afternoon off on a Friday so I could go visit her, which 2 years before that, I never would have done that. So you need to at some point say, okay, my life is important too. Like my life cannot be work. And I know a lot of people who are great strength coaches. The only thing that they've done from the age of 25 to 30 is be a strength coach. They haven't gone to any of their friends' weddings. They are putting off getting married themselves for 5 years. They take 3 vacation days a year, and the only way they see their family is if their family comes to see them. And I would look at that, and I spent so much time around that I thought, okay, that's not where I want to be. I want this job, but it's not at the expense of everything else. And like you said, I mean, there's things that are going to be poor for your mental health, and not prioritizing yourself at some point once you kind of have the hang of your job it's never going to get better if you don't actually step back and make it get better, because it doesn't just happen. You get sucked into the field. We enjoy our job, so we tell ourselves, okay, this is enjoyable, but to what degree is it enjoyable? Is that making up your whole life and you're completely satisfied and fulfilled only driving to your weight room and back every single day? I don't think I would be fulfilled like that if I'm 35 and that's all I've done.
Yeah, and even expanding on that, Ryan, I always said to my athletes, happiness is in several cups. I'm not a spiritual man, but to some people there's spiritual happiness. I think you need to find ways to make yourself happy. Like you said, like I had a very hard time finding a friend group after that relationship up in Detroit. And so I kept swinging the bat. And I think at the end of the day, whether you're a man or a woman or whatever in today's world, you need to swing the bat. You have to take a risk. You have to go either talk to that girl. You have to go talk to that coach if you want the job. You have to communicate with your parents if you're not doing okay. You need to talk to your doctor if you're not doing okay. Find happiness and then find ways to augment that happiness or keep it alive in a sense. But you have to find other hobbies and find anything else you can do. Because at the end of the day, yes, do I love my job? Absolutely. But if I go and that's all that I have to show for it, well, what kind of a person are you?
Mm-hmm.
Like you just work till you're dead? That's no way to live life. So yeah, I agree with you on that, man. But find other things that make you happy. Like for instance, I love writing. Never would, if you had met me in high school, I would have never said that. Absolutely not. But I get to write about what I want to write about, and then I get paid for it. So that brings a sense of joy to me that I can give that information back to our community. Once again, going back to what Christian said, find other ways to stay relevant in the field. And, take that chance, man. You may never get one. I know the industry preaches you have to intern under X person, or you have to, be in the right place at the right time. But you can also, put yourself in the right position. It's not just going to come to you. So there's several other factors we could definitely pull from later, man. But you need to have multiple sources of happiness, multiple ways to make things happen, and not be afraid to take a risk at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Something I want to highlight that Ryan said was he asked for a Friday afternoon off. And I know that personally, I found myself saying in my head, oh, I can't take this Friday off because what if something more important happens that I have to take off for, and I can't put that on my other coaches to cover my teams this time if I want to do it next time. You got to just freaking take that time off once in a while, because I know there's people out there that are just continually saying to themselves, oh, there's going to be something more important that I need to take off for, so I can't do it now. But you got to just do it sometimes.
Swing the bat, man.
Yeah. And part of that too is like, everyone thinks, okay, if I'm not there, everything's going to go to shit. No, it's not. Like, unless you're the only strength coach there and you need to shut the room down for the week because you're not there to unlock the door. Like, at Nova, we have 2 full-time guys and another GA, including me. So if I'm not there for a week and something's really important and I need to miss, I might be thinking, okay, like, I should be there. My teams aren't going to be okay. They're going to cover the workouts and everyone's going to move on without you there. And, like, you're going to leave your job. They're going to move on without you there. It's not the end of the world if you're not there. And people get so worried about, like, well, that makes me replaceable. I mean, to some extent, maybe it does, but that doesn't mean that the next strength coach is going to have those same relationships or that same impact. So you might not be as replaceable as you think just because you take a day off sometimes. You need that time for yourself. Otherwise, you do get replaceable because you get burned out and you get short-fused and you don't enjoy being there, and everyone around you can tell, even though you think you're hiding it, and you're not. Like, I've seen coaches get miserable over a few years, and they don't hold up because they don't take time to themselves, and it's just the same thing every day, and it doesn't work like that. Nothing does.
Yeah, and Ryan kind of highlighting that too. Like, I think a lot of coaches try to bottle it in and play the tough guy act, and to me, that's something I tried to do as a young coach, and I'd highly recommend not doing that, because that's going to crush you in the long term. People are going to pick up on that. Human beings are smart creatures, man. If you have a high emotional intelligence, you could say you're doing well, but we all know you ain't doing well. So you got to take that day off sometimes, man. And if you really get fired for that, it's not the best administration to work for long term anyway.
For sure.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I won't name the place or the person, but I've had a head coach working over me that was literally in the gym from 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock. And he loved it. Like, he was always happy and he was in a good mood. And I don't think it affected him at all. But personally, I cannot do that.
Yeah.
And we all try to do it if our boss is doing it, because we think, oh, if he's doing it, I have to, because otherwise I'm not good enough for this place. So you don't have to do that. At the end of the day, if you have a boss like that who's grinding harder than anyone you've ever seen and he can handle it, maybe he can. Maybe you can, but maybe you can't. And you have to know where your line crosses, whether you can handle that workload or not.
Yeah, and I think going forward too, the best strength coaches I've ever had have actually brought me in the office because they could tell I was getting a little burned out, or maybe I was tired and I was like a new 20-some-year-old coach in the field. And they're like, kid, how are you? Like, just don't worry about professionalism. Let all the venom out right now. What's going on in your head? Because they know that if they can, keep you sane, you can succeed in the field, but also they're telling you, vent, man, it's okay. Don't keep it bottled in. And for the guys that can lead like that, mazel tov, man. That's awesome. You're a great leader and your staff is going to benefit from your positive attitude, but also know who's on your staff too. I got people on our staff right now that if I have a conversation with them, it can go one of 4 different ways because we have 4 different very types of people on that staff. So I think communication is huge on that, man. Talk to your bosses, and bosses talk back. It's okay. The whole staff will benefit from it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, Ryan, I think we've reached about 45 minutes now. So if you guys have anything more to add on this mental health or communication or anything we've talked about so far, please do it. And then we're going to take a break and we're going to get right back at it with some more concrete stuff like interviewing and programming, stuff like that. So go ahead. Anything you want to say on the topics we've just discussed or anything relevant at all?
Ryan, you want to go?
Yeah, I'll go first. So just to add one last point to this whole mental health thing, our whole audience goal with this is like young interns or young professionals that might be GAs. You're not going to be the only intern there, and most of the time, like, if you moved across the country or moved across the state to intern there, so did the other guys or girls. So you guys should all try to make an effort to do something together outside of work and get to know each other as people. Because, like, that's how Christian and I met, is we both interned at Minnesota, and we'd go to Buffalo Wild Wings, and, like, we'd try to go out, like, on the weekends as a group and stuff, and that's fun. Like, that's getting to enjoy life and enjoy the new area you're in. Like, we were in Minneapolis, and it was an awesome city that I'd never been to. So, like, that was enjoyable. You need to do stuff like that when you're there, because the traveling, the new cities all the time can be a hard thing to deal with, but it can also be really fun. And, like, that's not something every profession gets to do. So get out and enjoy that stuff, because you're there anyways. You might as well make the most of it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say it if you didn't, Ryan. That was something that, we tried to do a lot when I was at Miami. We had, 3 or 4 grad assistants, and whenever we could, we did. And because of that, our staff benefited, or at least the GAs and interns did. But yeah, I definitely agree with Ryan on that. I don't think I have anything else to add, Christian.
All right, let's take a little break and then we'll get right back to it.
All right.